an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Gray's Sister, chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. In these chapters, Nona goes searching through the caves in the Rock of the Ancestor, and there is something there that is so frightening, it removes the memory of itself from her friends' brains. And honestly, it's kind of thoughtful. Thanks, appreciate it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Martin for commissioning this episode. Martin is here in the chat. Hi, Martin. I am just getting over laryngitis, and my voice is pretty much back, but this is the first recording that I'm doing since getting sick last week. So just forgive me if I have to. I have a thing of lemon water here, and if I have to take some breaks, I'm also doing the live read of a certain chapter of Breaking Dawn today. So we will see how it goes. But yeah, it has been a week. It was supposed to be vacation, guys. It wasn't. All right. So let's start off with chapter 6. Nona is having a hard time with feeling secure, sleeping in the dormitory, because she's sharing space with Joelle. And you know, honestly, I can't think of a worse case scenario than to be forced to share like a sleeping area with the people that have been bullying me. That is truly awful. And it's kind of surprising to me that there isn't a presence of any sisters in the dormitories, like to just at least give the impression that maybe one of them could walk in at any time and keep them a little bit more on their toes. It feels like they have total privacy, which, I mean, I understand. Like, I think that's a healthy thing. I think that's a good thing. But when you have everybody together like this, it's extremely, it's like a powder keg, right? Because this can't be the first time that they have had two students who were like at each other's throats like this. So yeah, I just really felt for Nona when she starts talking about how she's like, because honestly, because she has such skill and she has this like sort of, she is so aware. She's able to like kind of slow time in her way. I sort of think of her as being like able to, I think of her a little bit as a superhero, which I think is fair, but I don't really remember that she isn't going to be able to like just have spidey sense that wakes her up before she goes to sleep, you know, or wakes her up while she's asleep if somebody's trying to come at her. So this like sort of anxiety that she has, at first I was a little bit surprised, and I was like, oh yeah, she would, wouldn't she? So Nona goes and talks to Zol, who Zol had stood up for them, for Nona in front of all of the sisters in the previous chapters to say that Nona had not tried to strangle Joelle. And Nona goes up to Zol and is basically like, listen, not that I don't appreciate your help, but why did you say that you saw that I didn't do it when you didn't see that? And Zol's like, I didn't tell them I saw that. I told them you didn't strangle her, and you didn't, right? So I don't really understand what your problem is here. And Zol even says something about how, like, the truth is super important, that the abbess says the words that you choose are the stones that like pave the path, which was surprisingly sort of, I don't even want to say pious, I guess just ethical. I don't know Zoe very well, and I forget that, and sort of like, I'm guilty very much of seeing her through the eyes of all of these other girls who did not trust her when she arrived. And I'm guilty of still associating her with Yisht, who stole the ship heart. And that's not necessarily fair. We don't know anything about Zol's personality other than the fact that she is very much to herself, that she that she kind of feels like she is separate from all of this because she was raised on the ice, and this is just like she this culture that she was raised in is like, I mean, I guess she sees it as superior, which most of us see our cultures as superior. There is very little to go on with her. And the fact that she was so like concerned about telling the truth, I found rather surprising, but I like it. It gives me a little bit of something to hold on to. And Zol tells Nona that her life was only in danger because Nona failed to kill Raymel Taxis the first time. I thought this was so funny. Like, and Nona is very taken aback by it. She says, you should have cut his head off. And then Zol says, and I was just like, what? You should hide him better. You're careless. You lack control. I've seen him at your wrists when we fight and at your neck when you are screeching. On the ice, we know the Klaulathu. I don't know if that's how you say it. I read this portion. I did not use the audiobook. I'm also not entirely sure how much the audiobook, like whoever does the narration, is given just like the pronunciation of things and how much they just sort of invent. But she says, we do not run from them screaming devils like you people huddling in the corridor. And Zol tells her that it is possible to get rid of them, but it's hard, and it's better to live with him. They are of the missing, you understand this? Pieces of the missing that they abandoned before they crossed the path. What on earth? I love this development. And I love the fact that Chaos is now much more of an unknown quantity. I'll tell you what, I've just been seeing Chaos as basically Venom. And I think I said this last time. Full disclosure, I love the movie Venom, and nobody can tell me anything else, okay? I know that it's stupid. I don't care. I love it. It's great. It's hilarious. The moment when he climbs into a lobster tank in a fancy restaurant because this thing is motivating him to will never cease to be like peak humor to me. That is what I keep thinking of with this is, you know, this bloodthirsty kind of out of control creature constantly talking over Nona's shoulder and being like, hey, why don't you do this real destructive, violent, terrible thing? How about this? And Nona having to be like, no, that's not what we do here. Come on. So being told that this is like not exactly a known quantity by her people, but at least something that like they feel they know the origin of, whether they're right or not. It's very different than just devils, right? Devils, it's, first of all, I have always been somebody for whom like movies based on, what's the word? Possession, and demons and anything that has to do with like pretty serious, like, Christian, but especially Catholic iconography and sort of superstition, really. Those movies have never really worked for me because I don't believe in demons or anything like it's just not something that I buy at all. The one exception being Rashawn and I covered The Exorcist for a unsober episode. I was willing to accept that there were like devils in this world, and I was not going to have much baggage around that because this is a whole different world. I'm not associating it really with like a demon the way that I would in our own world. But for them to say that these are of the missing pieces that they abandoned before they crossed the path is really, really fascinating to me. I don't know what that means because, crossing the path is usually a sort of euphemism for dying, right? Now, pieces that they abandoned makes it sound much more proactive. Like they crossed the path, like it was more than just dying, like it was they cut off parts of themselves in order to be able to get away. Like they chose to walk the path as an escape route or something. It gives it a different tone or thought to me. And I don't know if that's just me or what. And also the fact that she says we don't run screaming from them. It's better to live with them. She does not tell Nona to get away from her. She's not afraid of Nona. This is something she has seen before, and she's not really that worried about it. It's more that she's advising Nona to be careful because she knows what everybody else is going to think, which I kind of respect that. She's trying to watch out for Nona in her way, So yeah, and I don't know. I like this development a lot. It makes me like rethink Chaos as a character. And there are a lot of moments later where Chaos is saying things and Nona's like, shut up, you're just selfish, you don't care. Or shut up, you don't have any friends. And I'm like, you don't know that though now. Nona, I would have thought you were being like, would have thought this like interaction was very funny and I would have agreed with you before this conversation. But now I kind of wonder if you're right about that. You don't know if Chaos has friends. You don't know if Chaos has like contact with other devils that are out there or had contact. You don't know what kind of like history he has. And I'm saying he, it seems like Nona calls Chaos he. But anyway, I thought this was like a really, really interesting development. So I'm here for this. So then we have a little moment between Nona and Darla. And I just want to mention this because I really love the fact that Nona and Darla are such good friends. Darla is talking about how difficult Blade Path is for her. And she has just a really poor sense of balance. And Nona is trying to be diplomatic and not say too much about it because everybody knows that Darla's really bad at this. And I am extremely curious if there is because, for Nona, she wasn't able to do it until she decided to go at full speed. If there is some similar sort of cheat, and I say cheat, but not really meaning it, just like a hack that Darla has that she hasn't yet run across. I also love that Nona, on principle, tries to eat more than Darla. There's something about that that's really sweet to me, and I'm not sure if the author meant it this way, but I'm heavy, right? And as a fat person, I am constantly aware that people are judging what I'm eating. It's an unavoidable thing. Whether you eat a healthy meal or whether you eat something that is really indulgent, people are going to have things to say to you about it. If you choose something unhealthy, people will side-eye you and, some people will be like, are you sure you really want that? If you choose something like a salad, I was eating a salad just because I love salad, not trying to lose weight. And I remember I was eating in the break room and my boss passed me and said, I'm so proud of you. Which, nobody would ever say that to a thin person eating a salad. That's just not a thing. I am aware that everybody notices what I eat because that's just the attention that gets drawn on me because of fat phobia. I don't know that this author meant it this way, but I see it as Nona almost protecting Darla from anybody talking shit by being like, I'm just going to eat more than her. So nobody's going to be like, making fun of how much she eats because I'm having even more. And whether the author meant it that way or not, I'm going to sort of take it that way. And I just think that's a really cute thing, especially because Nona is able to eat that much. Like, she is able to keep up, and it's not a problem for her. You know, she has to think it, she has to like notice and be aware, but she's still able to like finish all her food. Nona is a machine when it comes to eating. And I kind of appreciate that that is made into, like, there's a special point paid to that later when she goes to, oh my gosh, what is her name? The other, Ara. Jesus Christ. I kept wanting to say Joelle, but that's her enemy. When she goes to Ara's house to visit, the food is like a real focal point for her, which makes complete sense. There is nothing, if you are somebody who loves to eat, quite like the moment you realize that the food world is out there. Like, you can always know that you like to eat, but when you finally come across real cuisine, food treated like an art form, there's just this sort of moment of like, oh my God. I remember that happening to me. I have always been somebody who enjoyed baking, especially, and loved to cook to a degree. But I started dating a chef, and that was when I started to put weight on, unsurprisingly. But it was a real revelation for me, realizing that, like, there were a lot of things I had sort of assumed that I would not like, or that probably weren't as good as so-and-so said. And then I began to try things and realize, like, I had no idea what I was talking about. And there's like this universe of ingredients and combinations out there and methods that I just didn't know about. And honestly, it makes me like kind of want for Nona to be able to like get this again. Like, I want Nona to be a chef. I want her to like get dropped into somebody's kitchen and be like, go nuts, kid. And she just does, you know. That would be really fun to me. So, okay, they go to Path Tower, and the Path is the class where they have to, like, you know, they have to try and see the threads of each other. This is a really interesting description to me. Sister Pan is teaching them. The old lady who is just... Sister Pan is a threat to Chaot. Like, Chaot looks at her and is just like, yeah, no, I'm not messing with that old biddy. Like, she knows what's up. She could definitely fuck some shit up. I would not go up against her, which I find very, very fun. I like it. Sister Pan is talking to them about thread work. And she says that she thinks the abbess has some hint of quantal blood and a rare unconscious talent for the most ephemeral thread work. Done right, a gentle pull here, a touch there, a breath just sufficient to set a thread vibrating, and kings may be toppled, wars turned, the weak raised up. I love that idea, that the abbess maybe is doing something that's like low-key magical without even really intending to do it. That is the coolest to me. And I think that's a really interesting thing that, like, might actually apply to our own world. Honestly, there are things that I think sometimes are, I don't even want to say magical because that has so much baggage behind it, but I think that there are things that people can do that are on a level beyond what we know, at least. And that is like the ability to either manipulate people, but that makes it sound like, that sounds negative, and I don't mean it that way. But the ability to manipulate people, the ability to really read body language and understand where somebody is coming from, the ability to tell whether someone's lying, things like that. I feel like there is almost a bit of magic there. You have to be able to really focus and know people, and also have faith in your own assessments. And there is something to that that's sort of magical, you know? So Sister Pan shows them the path with all of the threads coming off it. And she says, when wool is spun on the wheel, a single length of yarn is wound around the spindle. But all around that strand of yarn, there is a halo of loose pieces, fibers of wool not quite twisted in, wandering out from the main body. The threads are not the path, but they are of the path. And because the path goes everywhere and runs through all things, so do the threads. And Nona looks at the image and sort of gets mesmerized by it. And Sister Pan says that there is danger here. The path will throw you sooner or later, but the threads will hold you. If you lack the will to free yourself, they will keep you until your years have run from you, and all that remains is to cross the path into darkness. Ooh, I am so interested. You can just get caught up in threads until you die. What? That's real spooky. I like that a lot. What a weird thing to have happen. And like, how do you know if it has happened to somebody? Does the person's body, do they look like they've kind of gone into a coma? Like what exactly, how do they know that can happen? In other words, so she says pathwork is closer to the brute force approach of the Red Sister, and threadwork is more subtle, like the arts of the Gray Sister, all stealth and guile. Mystic sisters shade either towards red or gray. And Nona's like, we shouldn't be manipulating people. I would rather be straightforward and allow everyone free will. And Sister Pan is basically like, honey, that's sweet, but like, come on. Everybody is influenced every second of every day by everyone around them. There is absolutely no way to avoid it. In threadwork, we're just more direct about it. So if you like directness, this might be something you prefer. So she does something to Nona, and Nona is suddenly so hungry. And when she lets go of that thread, Nona's hunger disappears and she realizes that she's full, that she just ate breakfast. And she tries to be like, this is different, though, than what you were talking about. The effects of influence that you were talking about that we have on each other every day. Those are just, a matter of course of living in the world. What you just did to me, making me hungry, is totally different because you couldn't make me hungry with just words. To which Sister Pan says, if I described a roast chicken in exquisite detail, steaming on a plate of buttered potatoes, its skin golden and crisp, seasoned with salt and pepper, your mouth wouldn't begin to water, your stomach rumble? Nona's mouth had already filled with saliva. When it came to food, her strings were remarkably easy to pull. Amen, sister. So, yeah, I love this whole interaction, and I think it's really, really interesting. And I wonder about, somebody like, I guess one could even say Mark Lawrence, the author, is pulling threads by writing, right? Like it's a simple comparison, actually. And she mentions Hessa and that she was a huge loss because Pan has never seen somebody so young, so good at thread work in her life ever, which is really saying something. This is an old woman. I can't help but wonder if Hessa's really gone. Like, I know she is, but there's a part of me that feels like maybe not. And I don't really have any ideas behind that. I don't have anything to back that up. But I feel like Hessa is somehow still at play. And I don't know. It could just be wishful thinking on my part. I don't know. So Sister Pan tells them you can never pull the same thread twice, and you can never pull just a single thread. Everything affects everything else, and you will be noticed if you start to do it too much, and it will start to affect so many things. And that there are spiders on the threads that will like kind of come at you if you keep messing with it. If you pull on a strand of web hard enough and often enough, a spider will come. The spiders will, like as not, be humans, older, more powerful quantal thread workers, marginal sorcerers with particular talents, intuitives such as Abbey's glass. But there are bigger spiders out there too. This world is not ours. It is older than us. The missing were gone before our ships beached here. When the corridor was 1,000 miles wide and there was no moon in the sky, they were gone. Echoes of them live among the threads, vibrations that will not fade. And there are others, their servants and things more ancient still. So tread softly, work sparingly, and hope. So that seems to me describing chaos a little bit, the echoes living amongst the vibrations that will not fade. And I wonder if Pan isn't like aware that chaos is there and keeping it to herself, because she also has like a better understanding of what chaos is. Because, the main reason that Nona is keeping it so secret is that she is worried about, I'm trying to remember Sister Wheel, right? Sister Wheel, I think, and Sister Rail are the ones that are like the strictest, if I'm not mistaken. And they are the ones that she's certain, if they found out she had this thing in her, would want her kicked out. And I wonder if Pan doesn't have like a better understanding, and she knows, but she's keeping it to herself because she realizes that Nona is still worth teaching and still deserves to be here despite that, I don't know. Okay, so they have to look at one another and try and see each other's threads. And Nona tries so hard with Zol, and she can't do it. She's like really frustrated at it because she tries so hard, and she knows that she's not good at this, but she really puts in an effort. And finally, she just says she doesn't have any. And Sister Pan is like, come on, of course she does, and steps in front of her, and she's like, let me do it. And she looks. But then she's like, what is this? And Nona says, so she doesn't have any. And Pan is like, of course she does. Everything does. Were you not listening to me? But only the deepest and most fundamental, those hardest to find. Where there should be a myriad blazing around her, there are just a few, and buried deep in the stuff of the world, I have never seen the like. I am super duper curious what this means. It's almost like Zol is of a different race entirely. And we know that she's the four-blood, and maybe that's what does it. Maybe the four-blood, that combination causes the threads to be so much more subdued and concentrated. But I don't know, I'm just like, I don't know. I just think this is really interesting. Zol is just a fascinating character to me because she has been such a slow burn. It would be really easy to, and forgive me guys, I'm putting my blanket around my shoulders here. It would have been really easy, I think, to make Nona the chosen one, first of all, and to make the chosen one be an everyman, somebody that's just like everybody else. And, they are kind of like blown away at the fact that they are the chosen one, but willing to shoulder the burden despite it all. And I really enjoy that Lawrence hasn't done that here. Zola is a very distinct character. She is extremely different from everyone around her, at least in this community that we know of. She is willing to do the job, but she doesn't particularly, like we see later, there's a certain amount of like celebrity that comes from being what she is. And she is not interested in that at all. And it's not just not interested, because that is a common thing. When you have a chosen one in stories, oftentimes there will be people who have huge expectations of them, and they are deeply uncomfortable with it because of both the pressure that it puts on them to perform that they're not sure that they are up to, but also this idea that they are somehow like the savior of everyone, that they think is maybe even unfair. With Zol, her wanting to avoid that isn't about it's really not about being like the pressure itself or being too much or feeling like I'm not sure I'm up to it. Zol is an introvert and she just doesn't want to talk to people. So they come at her wanting all of this interaction, wanting her to sort of like be an expert in public relations. They want her to be a bit of a politician, I guess. And she is so not here for that at all. And decides to keep herself to herself as much as is humanly possible. And between that and this, there are really distinct, separate, like there are really distinct characteristics about her that separate her from everybody else. And that is just not something that you often find in a story that's about like a person who is selected to be the savior. And I kind of like it, you know, I'm kind of here for that. I feel like there's also the aspect that Zol looks so much more, the impression that I get from the description of her is that she looks rather Native American, because she is supposed to have like kind of like slanted dark eyes and very, very straight hair and kind of like a reddish skin tone, like that's like, you know, affected by the sun. She is supposed to be, I believe, representative of a group of people who were here originally, or at least of like more closely linked to the, like, I don't even want to say originals because the missing are the originals, right? But she seems to have like closer ties to the history of this planet in her bloodline. And I'm wondering if that is significant at all, if there is something that Lawrence is saying there, but I guess we'll see. So, chapter 7. This is really, really interesting. They're climbing through these tunnels, right? This is the, nobody had ever told the novices that they weren't to explore the caves and passages that riddled the plateau. But Nona always had the strong impression that this was because they hadn't asked, and also because all the entrances known to the nuns were barred and gated, the locks inscribed with sigils to defeat any form of picking. When Jula had first discovered the caves a year earlier, Nona had moved their weekly meetings underground, where the chances of detection shrank to 0. Nominally, the objective of the group was to recover the ship art, but for Nona, it had always been about killing Yisht. And this is, you know, unsurprising to me that is what it's about for Nona. There are a lot of things that we like see. I missed last time until Martin mentioned it, that the ship heart being gone meant that there was no hot water. And there's a lot more mention of it in these chapters, that they use coal to heat the water in the baths once a week on Sundays, I think, basically Sundays, that there is no heating system anymore. So like the towers are freezing now where they have their classes and everything. The lack of ship heart has hugely affected their way of life here. So honestly, everybody else being focused on the ship heart, I get it. But for Nona, she's like, that bitch killed my friend. I will kill her. The end. Like, that's all it is. And I get that too. So let's see. Okay, yeah. Who's got something to report? I do. Jula stepped up. She apparently is a big reader, and she always has something to report that everybody else is kind of bored by. But she says, according to Lebanon, there were 4 ship hearts within the Empire's boundaries. The one at Sweet Mercy, which is most closely tuned to the Quantals. Another we knew about in the Noi Gwyn's keeping at the Tetragode, which is attuned to Margils. One, he says, is rumored in the city of True, and one from a Garant ship in the keeping of the mage Atoen. And Ara's like, I've never heard of Atoen. I've never heard of this city. Somebody would have stolen it by now. And Jula says Lebanon was writing 200 years ago. True is under the ice now, the black ice. And it was ruins before the ice took it. True's a city the missing left, and Atoen died years ago. But he had a son, Jaltone, who was also a mage, and somehow is still alive, who Darla has heard of. My father, he lives on the coast and helped General Hillen when the Dernish tried to land at Port Treen 2 years ago. My father was the general's second in command. And Ruli says, I don't really get how this helps us. And Ara says, because now we know where Scherzel will have to look next. And they say that they're going to the ice because they go ice ranging in Mystic class. Over the ice, though, not under it. I will confess, I didn't really understand the significance of this until we go into a POV with Abbess Glass a little bit later, where she's talking to Kettle, and she gets a sample of like the black ice, which it turns out is not just ice. There's something else going on there. And there is just a lot more. When they say Tallow is never going to take us up to the black ice, I didn't really understand what that meant. I thought that black ice was really just meant like the ice that's deepest. I thought it meant like ice that's mixed with earth, that's like a foundational part of the landscape, versus newer ice that has grown over since the sun has begun to die. Like I expected it to be an indicator of age and ancient, areas of the world. I did not expect it to be something that was like a distinct substance of its own. So they begin to reach like the furthest areas of their exploration. And they have like ropes and things that they've placed in different areas to make it easier. And eventually they get to a place. First of all, there's this moment that I don't know if this is significant, but they took them past the niche where two skeletons lay, limed over with rock scale, one grown and one a child, locked together. A rusty stain between them may once have been a knife. They had always made Nona sad, huddled there in the dark, watching with empty sockets as the centuries scurried by. That is really sad, and I am super curious to know what the fuck that's about and if that means anything. So they have been exploring all over the place under here. And Nona finally says that she wants to get under the convent. And she says, I need to visit the Shipheart Vault. And Ruli's like, girl, we're already going to be in trouble in these tunnels. If we go there, they will definitely catch us, and we are going to be in such worse trouble. And Nona says, I'm banned from leaving the convent until next 7 day in any case. So if I'm right under it, I'll be breaking fewer rules. I felt Hessa die. I felt the rocks, Yisht's knife. I felt all of it. If there's justice to be had or revenge, it starts there where it happened. I don't want to go near the convent. The sinkhole's too close. Ketty got to her feet behind them. There could be tunnel floods. I still say they'll have the undercaves blocked off. Darla followed Ketty into the chamber, brushing grit from her habit. Maybe, but it's as good a direction to explore as any other, Ara said. Nona thanked her silently. I don't know. Darla shook her head. The abbess wasn't joking when she put the undercaves off limits. She wrote it in the book and everything. That was over 2 years ago. Ara came to Nona's defense. Plus, if they didn't know Yish was there for all those weeks and she was going to and fro from her room, they won't know we're there if we come from underneath for a quick look. So they all finally agree to help. and try and get her there, even though it looks rather unsafe and, is a bit nerve-wracking. They mark their way on the walls with chalk as they go. There is a moment here that I enjoyed. Now more than ever, she felt the irony that the rock of faith, named for the foundations of their religion, lay rotten with voids and secret ways, permeable and ever-changing. Yeah, I also deeply enjoy that. It makes sense. So then we get to the moment where things begin to shift. Stalagmites rose in small, delicate forests, descending in curtains where the cave curved down, glistening with an iridescent sheen like the carapace of a beetle. Now, I'm not totally sure if that means anything, if that's just a description or if this is an indicator of something. But that moment is immediately followed by Ruli stopping and saying, "Don't you hear that? Something's out there coming for us." "There's nothing living in these caves," Darla said. "We would have seen bones or dung. What did it sound like?" "Dry." Ruli shivered. "Dry?" "I want to go back," Ruli said. Ara advanced a few yards, lantern high. "There's something here." Nona crowded forward with the others, leaving Ruli in deepening shadow. "What is it?" Ketty frowned. To Nona's eye, it seemed that a shadowy forest of misshapen stalagmites covered the cavern floor, some curving over in ways that such growths are not supposed to. Bones. Jula saw it first. From one instant to the next, the scene switched from one of confusion to one of horror. Skeletons, calcified like those back in the niche, but more thickly. Dozens of them. "Some of these have been here for an age." Ara pointed to a stony ribcage from which straw-thin stalactites dripped, and to a skull distorted by the weight of a stalagmite growing upon it like a candle from which half the wax had run. Jula bent over to inspect something by the wall. "We really need to go," Ruli called at them. "Can't you feel it?" "I don't." But then Nona felt it and held her tongue. Something scraping at the edges of her senses, a dry touch from which her mind recoiled. "Holathor." "What?" "You should run. You always tell me to fight. Now I'm telling you to run." "We should go back, now." "What are you scared of? There's nothing here." "What's out there, Kaod?" "Something missing bread. Something hungry. Run." So they begin to run. Darla is still like, "I don't get what y'all are talking about." But as they begin to take off, Darla catches up with the rest of them and realizes and starts to feel it as well. With each passing moment, it seemed that something gathered itself behind them, as if the space now echoing with their footfalls was drawing in its breath. Nona felt the horror of it crawl along her spine. The darkness held something awful, something ancient and waiting. The need to be gone made her heart pound and tightened her breath into gasps. "Oh, blood!" Even Darla felt it now, her face white. Nona knew with cold certainty that beyond the margins of their illumination, the calcified bones stretched out yard upon yard, innumerable victims lying in meticulous order. How many centuries had they watched the darkness? And she knew that among them paced a horror. She felt it now, individual, condensing out of the night, taking form. Perhaps it wore a man's shape, perhaps even her own. And if it ever raised its face to her, she would drown in nightmare. By the time they reached the chamber where they had chosen between the 3 unexplored passages, all of them were running. Ruli was already on the rope. Jula didn't wait for her to get off. Ara stood with her back to the cliff, lantern high, staring at the tunnel mouth. Ketty and Darla crouched by the edge, urging the others down. It was all Nona could do not to push between them and make her own grab for the rope. "Ancestor, hurry it up!" The cry broke from her. Ruli and Jula reached the bottom together and went sprawling in a clatter of loose stones. Ketty began to climb. "It's coming! We can't stay! Ara, come on!" Eventually, they come out into the sun. And all of a sudden, their flight seemed very foolish. I'm never going in there ever again. What were we running from? The first time when serenity would really have helped us, Ara said. And we ran. Nona couldn't believe she hadn't reached for her serenity. So they're looking at themselves and seeing that they are a mess. They have like tears in their habits. They are covered in dirt. They are going to be in big trouble. But Nona is just really taken aback at the fact that they're all much more concerned about getting in trouble with the teachers than that thing that was behind them. And she's like, guys, are we going to talk about what the fuck that was? And all they'll say is just, I'm not going back in there again. And Nona points at something that's at Ara's feet. And Nona tries to grab her and talk to her. It turns out it's a knife, but it's a knife. It's one of the like Noel Gwyn knives. Nona grabs at Ara and tries to talk to her and says, don't you remember the monster? Ara's blue eyes met the darkness of Nona's, and for a moment there was a recognition of something. Each took a step toward the other. No, Ara shook her head. I'm sorry. The fragile moment broke. She pulled free and hurried after the others, and Nona felt as if some chance that might never come again had escaped her. So then she starts talking to Kayat and asks what the hell that was. And Kayat says it's a holothor. It says the fear untied them. The threads that bound them to that place, to these caves. The fear untied them. It set those memories loose. By the time they reach the top, this will all have been a dream for them. The holothor made them forget. You didn't forget because I protected you. I don't believe you. You're made of lies. And I'm like, but is he, Nona? Is he? So she picks up the knife and, she recognizes it as the one that got thrown at her when she was in bed. And Kayat says that he recognizes the knife as well. The woman who held it came to see a dead man, to understand the person who killed him so that she might in turn kill them. Who did she come to see? Ray Multaxis. He was dead, but the mages wouldn't let him die, and I was the first to find my way beneath his skin. And the woman was a Noel Gwyn, tasked to kill you. And that is the end of chapter 8. So, the next chapter, there is a lot about Nona trying to get her friends to remember. And they are so repulsed by this memory, or the possibility of the memory, that basically they start avoiding her because she continues to question them about it. And Nona is also still not doing great with thread work. Ooh, sorry guys. She's struggling a lot with that in a way that she hadn't been. And part of the next lesson is going to be disguise. And she's trying to think about somebody else who can help her with bringing back this memory for her friends, but there's nobody that she can do it with that won't blow their cover entirely. She can't tell Pan like we were exploring down there. So she decides to focus on this upcoming shade class with the description or the disguises. And she isn't exactly super great at this. So this is something that she gets a little bit worried about, especially because some of them have more access to other types of clothing and physical disguises. The deal with using shadow to disguise yourself is that it's meant to change your eye color, change your hair color, you change how you stand, but it's not all magic. Some of it is just practical. And she doesn't have access to some of the practical aspects. And that is something that Ara winds up helping her with a little bit later. So then we have her in algebra class, and we have them talking about the moon which is, again, reminder, not a regular moon. The moon is like a satellite that is used to focus the sun in and melt the ice to keep the planet habitable. And Nona says at this point that the moon could be a weapon. If the focus was narrowed further, it could burn cities. And Sister Rael says that's not what it's for. There's no reason to think that it can be directed to focus that narrowly. If it can be tilted, it could be steered from the corridor entirely, then returned, Nona said, staring at the glistening white of the globe on Rael's desk. Whole nations could be denied the focus and the ice would swallow them. It could melt vast lakes on the ice, then connect them to the corridor, washing away armies and cities. And Nona, like, she's in the middle of this, like, kind of brainwave, I guess, when Rael is like, bitch, we were talking about the formula for a circle. Stop it. But Nona is like looking at this and realizing, I think, that maybe that's what Yish's mission is about. That they want the ship heart in order to control the moon. And in this way, basically rule the world. And the world is very small at this point. So ruling the world is much more of a possibility in this universe than ruling the world tends to be in a lot of the books out there. So then they head out to, they have, let's see, the 7th day, nothing had changed. Nona had agreed to accompany Ara on a visit to Terra Mensis, a distant cousin of hers. Yeah, I'm sorry. Earlier I had said it was Ara's house, but it wasn't. It's her cousin's house, but it's like within her family. And Nona is a little bit, I think, more nervous about this than she wants to admit. She's very aware that she comes from humble stock and that no matter whether she is a classmate of Ara's or not, anybody will be able to tell in an instant that she is a peasant. And that makes her a little bit self-conscious. And she is very surprised at the fact, not only that Ara asked her to go, but also that she asked Zol to go. She's like, really? And then Abbess Glass gives permission for both of them to go. And that, more than anything, Nona's just like, I don't get it, but okay. So they head out with Sister Kettle, and she had thought that they for sure were going to be given somebody who is a bit more stead and by the book and a rule follower to keep an eye on them. I am surprised that she expected that, because the two of them have been in danger so many times, 3 of them. Of course Kettle's coming with them. Like, are you kidding me, girl? What are you thinking? Kettle's the one. We find out a little bit later more about Kettle's personality, which I didn't expect at all. Kettle, it turns out, is actually a little bit withdrawn and shy, which is not how I pictured her, but I find it very interesting. So they wind up losing Zol as everybody comes up to her telling her to bless them, touch my son because he's ill, and her son is clearly like dead already. But Zol just like fucking books it and takes off. And then we have the meeting between Ara and her cousin and Nona. And this is a moment where I don't know if you guys have ever gone to the home of somebody who truly has money, but it is there's almost a feeling of vertigo to it when you are in the home of a person who you can see has never had to worry about the things that you have been obsessed with your entire life. There is no way to not feel a little bit of resentment over it. You can be impressed. You can be avaricious or envious, but there's always like in your heart, I think, a bit of why? How is this fair? You know? She found it hard to imagine that anyone lived here day by day, striding through these corridors and knowing that they owned it all. Yeah. When I was in high school, my roommate her father had written The Wonder Years, and her mother was like a producer. And I went to stay at her home for a bit, and it was in Bel Air on this hillside, this pool overlooking this valley, and they had a live-in servant. And it was just one of those moments of just being like, oh my God, like you can know somebody has money, but there's a difference between knowing and seeing it and really like, so this woman, Tara is her name, the cousin to Ara, is actually really nice. And Nona likes her right away, which I appreciated, that there's not like, it would be very easy to make her kind of unlikable because she has money. But oftentimes people who have money are nice. They're just kind of clueless, And Nona is met by Regal, who is one of the dudes that was really handsome that she's run into a couple times after having been in the fighting crew with her. And there is a bit of a crush happening here. She feels a bit of envy towards Tara because Tara is able to sort of like have ownership of him almost. And Regal appeared to be able to fascinate the other two just by sitting there, and she'd found herself being drawn into it too, letting her gaze wander the length of him. Perhaps he had a touch of the marginal empathy that Marcus had once spoken of. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, or maybe he's just super hot. I am running out of time. So they are, she is struggling to keep Kia under wraps because Kia is like wanting to take everything from Tara. He wants Nona to attack and like mate with Regal and everything. It is really hilarious. But they are in the middle of having like something to eat when they get interrupted by Kettle bursting in through the door. Martin says, I love when Regal says, the last time I saw Nona, she was on her back surrendering to me. Yes. And I also like, there's a moment he says, because Tara says, I hear Scherzel takes all manner of pleasure in the company of our ring fighters. Keep your guard up, Regal, because he was invited to Scherzel's place, which he thinks is a big deal, but it turns out everybody was invited to Scherzel's place at this point. And he says, always, around Gretchen especially, but hardly less so in the homes of the rich and powerful, present company excepted, of course. They all laughed at that, though probably for 4 different reasons. I really liked that line for 4 different reasons. He's laughing because he doesn't have to keep his guard up around you because you're not a temptation. She's laughing because he thinks, I'm not keeping my guard up around you because I want to be with you. There's like all kinds of interpretations of that. So this is when Nona realizes that food is like an art form and she's amazed. They are all served chai. And this is when Kettle comes bursting in and tells them not to drink it. And the serving maid behind Regal spins and she puts her fingers against Regal's neck, pressing on a nerve cluster. And it turns out that she is fucking one of the Noe Gwyn and tells them that the chai isn't poisoned. And then she is one of the Noe Gwyn, right? And she says, I came to speak with Zol. If I'd wanted your novices dead, you would be collecting their warm corpses now. And then says that Apple has poisoned Kettle's mind against her. Which, what does that mean? Oh, Martin says, no, she's Scherzel's hit woman. Oh, okay. I thought that she was a Noe Gwyn. Okay, so she works, and Kettle's old girlfriend. Ah, okay. Oh, Saphira right. That name does ring a bell now. Sorry, that's the problem when I have so much space between these episodes is I'll forget things. So yeah, she came to try and find Zol, and Kettle is like, well, Zol's not here. What made you think she might be? And I'm like, Kettle, I don't understand how you can ask her that when all these people are like the Argatha coming up to her in the street. They apparently know who Zol is. I don't really understand that line of like being like, well, what made you think she'd be here? Everybody seemed to know she was coming. I don't get it. So yeah, there's this sort of like interaction between them where Saphira seems to imply that Apple is lying to Kettle. You'll find out, but it will be too late by then. Scherzel is our only hope. Crucicle lacks the imagination. Valera is a blunt weapon. We can sink together with the Emperor, or some of us can swim. Scherzel didn't order your friend's death, Nona. Yish is dangerous, but you use the tools you have. I'm not your enemy. The Neugwin haven't forgotten you. That's a warning from a friend. So they get into a fight, and I actually was rather impressed with the description of this fight. And I think that part of the reason why this was so well done to me is because it's so quick, but eventually she pulls out the mustard and is just like, yeah, so I don't have time for this. And this is going to disable everybody here. I can use it if you won't just let me go, but I gotta go. Oh my God. I've reached an hour and I'm only on chapter 9. I'm trying to make sure that oh God, then we have Nona. I think I can kind of cover 9 pretty quickly because Nona gets in a fight with Joelle. Joelle waits and jumps her in the bathhouse with her friends. And Joelle is good at thread work and is able to pull Nona's blade, like her knives, back into her hands so that she is not able to defend herself in the normal way. And that to me just feels really rude. Like, I hate that that's even a possibility. So she's still able to fight back because she's so fast, but her prime weapon is gone, is disabled. However, Joelle really thought that doing that would shut Nona down completely. And Nona winds up fucking them up. And I will say, probably this fight scene, to me, is one of the best written I've ever read. And I think that's because there is a name for each person involved in the fight. So it's a lot easier to keep track. A lot of times you read fight scenes like this, and it's like 2 main characters, and one of them has their like cronies with them who are kind of like nameless. And it's very tricky to write. But when you have everybody with a distinct name, it's just easier to keep track of. And I found this just really compelling to read. And I felt like I could picture every move from it, which is not true of a lot of fight scenes. So eventually she's fucked up, but she manages to fuck everybody else up pretty good before they get her down. And Darla steps in and fucks them up to get Nona out of there because Darla is an MVP. I love her so much. And she wants to take her to the teacher, like to the sanatorium. But she's like, Nona says, Joelle doesn't want to go up before the convent table again. She thought that they would give me a beating and escape without a scratch. So they won't tell on me. They won't get me in trouble because they're going to just say that they like fell down the stairs or something. And 2 novices were leaving as they arrived, their hair steaming. Both offered wondering looks but said nothing because she's covered in blood. So Nona sinks into the water to try and like heal from this. And I'm just like, girl, I'm sorry, but Joelle is the devil. She really is. So then we have chapter 10. And I'm going to have to go through this pretty quickly, but I've talked about some of it already. Glass is from Abbess Glass's perspective. Glass is looking at Kettle and realizing that she just doesn't really know who Kettle is. if Kettle is putting on this like nervousness and hesitation, or if she's much smarter and quicker than she pretends to be. It's difficult for her to tell. She knows part of Kettle's history, which is basically Kettle was completely abandoned by her mother when her mother met somebody and fell in love and ran off. But Kettle tells everybody that her mother was taken ill and died. And she's talking to her about the ice. In Kettle, to Glass's mind, a knife was a very effective way to cut off any relationship. But the bonds of affection Kettle formed were resilient ones, and she had been very close to Saphira for years. In that respect, she shared much with Nona, which, yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking until I came to that line. It was just like, she sounds like Nona. She's not willing to let go of people because she doesn't have many people, and so they mean more to her. I am married to somebody like this, or about to be married. So this moment, she talks to her about Saphira. You said she knew Zoli was coming. Who took the message to Lord Mensis? Sister Pale. So they decide, first Kettle's like, I'm going to kill Sister Pale. And she's like, no. We are going to figure out how to give Pale the information we want her to have. And Kettle is talking about how she is in the shadow and that she's already tainted. And there is something about that that's sort of like, I'm so over time. But she just is sort of seeming to think that she's a lost cause. And Abbess is telling her she can come back to the light, that there is, work to be done, what she's doing, but she can come back from it. And she tells Kettle that she has done exceptional work on her report and wants to know about the ice. What do we need to set aside for Queen Adoma? The queen is a very passionate woman. Nothing seems to motivate her so much as being denied. And she talks about reaching the black ice. Few from the Empire had ever seen it. I found the account of your experiences confused. You lost track of Adoma and her priests in the outer chambers. And she's like, yeah, I did. The tunnels were like dotted with guards. She was lost to me because I fell into a nightmare due to the ice. The ice took me. I would not have lived if I weren't like this. And I am really curious what the fuck that means. If that's something to do with like what's going on with Nona as well and the ice that they came across under the Rock of the Ancestor, if it's the same thing. But yeah, she chipped some ice free and brought the sample with her and tells Glass about that the forest, the trees grow that Dernishmen build their barges from. Those trees are fed on meltwater from the black ice, and they think that means that wood is like still alive and has some properties of its own. And I'm fascinated, and I really want to talk more about that, but I'm out of time. So I'm sorry, Martin, for running out of time, but I will try and recap that a little bit better next time. Thank you guys for bearing with me while my voice recovers. I really am enjoying this book a lot so far. I feel like I have a better grasp of what's happening here as well than I have in other books. So we'll have to see, or in the previous book, I should say. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. So thank you again, Martin, very, very much for this commission. And I will be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.